Hi, welcome into lesson 1.04 of Intro to AV. This is about the history and impact of AV in film. So let's go ahead and get started. We're going to talk about the earliest forms of AV technology that we can find, and we're going to talk about their impact, and we're going to talk about things all the way up to present time. So let's get started. The first piece of AV technology we can find is called the camera obscura. This is a natural optical phenomenon that occurs on one side of a screen and is projected through a small hole as a reverse and inverted image on a surface opposite to the opening. So, as you can see with this image on the top, what happens in a camera obscura is you have this man standing right here. You have a small hole. The sunlight is your light source in this image. You have this man projected through the small hole in this box right here, and it is projected on to the back side of this wall across the screen, upside down and inverted. So if you look down at this projection right here, this picture, this is an actual projection of a camera obscura. One has made a camera obscura box, and the outside is projected inside, upside down and inverted. So that's what it is. These are the earliest pieces of AV equipment, and they were used really heavily in the Renaissance period. And the first time we see it written about is about 500 BC. Mozi, a Chinese philosopher, describes the camera obscura phenomenon. And at around 384 BC, Aristotle describes camera obscura phenomenon in Europe. So you have about 500 BC, Mozi, a Chinese philosopher, discovers it and talks about it. Around 384 BC, Aristotle talks about it in Europe. So with that, we'll move on to lighting. So around 450 BC, the Greeks used sunlight to light their amphitheaters. Greeks invented the theater, and the first form of lighting was just the sun. So moving on from that, around the year 1500, theaters moved from outside to inside. So about 950 years it took for theater to be a thing, and then them to make indoor theaters. About 950 years passed. So the first form of lighting inside the inside theater was candle, because that's the technology they had. So if you'll see this top image right here, this is a representation of an inside theater lit by candles. It's from about 1500 to about 1800, so about 300 years. In the 1780s, you had oil lamps that started to light in the theaters. And then around 1800, you started to get gas lines in buildings, and you could do gas lamps. This was the first time that at a live theater event or a live entertainment event at all, you could have different levels of lighting, because you could control the amount of gas or oil going into the lamps, and you could also put different colored bulbs or glass on the outside of it to make the light different colors. Those were the first time you could actually manipulate the light. So late in the 1830s, the limelight was introduced. It's a block of lime heated up and created a bright white light. This was the most controllable form of entertainment light at the time. So this picture right here is a picture of the limelight. All right. So that block of limelight is heated up and creates bright white light. So when you hear of the adage, someone likes the limelight, or you know, something like that. This is what it's referring to. It's a theater term, the limelight, but it was actually a light that we used to illuminate in the theater. So it was around the 1830s is when this was introduced. Around 1846, you started to have carbon arc lighting. So it was first used in Paris, creating light when two rods of carbon are electrified and touch together. So this is carbon rod lighting right here, this picture. Next to it is a carbon rod lamp that they used to use in theaters. In the 1880s, Thomas Edison invented the incandescent lamp. This was used in theaters since the 1880s. So this is the incandescent light bulb, carbon filament. That was the first form of the incandescent light bulb. In the 1960s, the filament got improved with the tungsten halogen filament. So the tungsten halogen bulb is an incandescent. It is an incandescent bulb, like the carbon filament bulb, but it basically what happens with the tungsten halogen is it creates a chemical reaction that makes the lamp brighter and lasts longer. So that was an improvement in the 1960s. In the 1980s, you got the HID bulb, which basically it stands for high intensity discharge. It creates an electrical arc between tungsten and electrodes, and occurs in a tube that creates plasma. So you're basically creating plasma inside of this bulb. That's the HID bulb. Those are really, really, really bright and are not as common as some of the other ones, but if you have a big spotlight or something like that, it's very possible it could have an HID bulb in it. And then in LED lights were created in the 60s, but they weren't very common until about 2008. They are here's some red, green, and blue ones down here. LED lights are the cold, not as hot lights that we're familiar with. So that is lighting. All right, history of cameras. The first photograph was taken in 1816, and the first practical photographic process was invented in 1836. This is the world's oldest known photograph right here. I believe it was around the 1820s. That's when this was taken. But it seems to be of somebody outside. But this is, I don't know what it is of, really, but it's the world's oldest photograph. All right. And then we have the phonograph. 1877, Thomas Edison invents the phonograph. This is the first device to reproduce sound. This is a predecessor to the record player. This is the first audio reproduction device. It basically you would use little cylinders that a needle would roll across, and that would create the sound coming out of the little speaker right here. Okay, so that is going to be part one of the history and impact of AV and film. If you'll look on your assignment, you'll see part two next.